All right, so this is a TCCM transmission control module off of a 2001 Chevy Silverado 2500 HD with the 6.0. Issue is, if you look here, go into history. So, where are we at? Automatic transfer case, C0308, motor AB circuit low. Basically what we did is we checked the wire integrity on the vehicle. So I'll show you on the schematics here. So if you look, this is your transfer case control module, which is this guy right here. This is an old one, this is a new one. And if you look, your motor here, it's out, the wires are always going to the ground through the motor. We check the wire from here to there, there to there. Continuity and voltage, everything is good. This is a whole new encoder motor. This whole system is new. But what happens is the computer will tell this to get 12 volts and it'll make this motor go clockwise, or it'll make this go 12 volts and then it'll go counterclockwise, or vice versa. So if you take this to 12 volts, it goes to ground, this to 12 volts, the other one's already at ground. Reverses the polarity to move the motor, and then the position sensor tells it, okay, hey, I'm at this position for 4 high, 4 low, 2 low, neutral, whatever, and then the brake control stops it. So what we checked yesterday, these two wires here are all good. We checked all the powers and grounds to this module. They're all good. This part down here is new. I think it was replaced twice before. So I'm just getting into this vehicle here and taking a look at it. So it looks like, honestly, it's a bad module. I mean, this could be bad again, but what I'm doing now is I'm using my bench breakout box here with my scan tool, and I'm going to communicate with it. So what I got here is I got a constant voltage and an ignition voltage and a ground. So my constant voltage is connector C2 pin D, C2 pin D, and I got that going to my 1215, so that's when I turn it on, it's always giving a voltage. And then I got ignition voltage, E10 C1, so this is E2 connector, and then or C2 connector and pin E10. I got that going to my 12 volts 30, so when I turn that on, it gives ignition. I got my ground on pin C on connector 2, which is this one right here, going back to ground. I got a chassis ground, or a case ground, because if you look at the bottom of this board, right there, if you can see it, that's where, right where my thumb is, that's the case ground. The screw would come through on this board. This would mount to the vehicle, case ground. I got that grounded. I got it piggybacked into my breakout box, chassis ground. And then what I'm looking at is, bear with me here. There's a lot more of the circuitry to this, but what we're looking at is just that AB code. And then my transfer case module, I have another ground, E16, connector 1. E16, connector 1, going to my other ground. And then to communicate with it on the bench, E9, connector 1 is my class 2 serial data. Connector 1, E9, going to my class 2 serial data. So what I'm going to do now is hook up my scan tool. Of course, there's going to be other codes in there. There's going to be encoder codes. The motor code will come and go, because it's always doing self-checks. It's looking for resistance across that circuit, right? But we don't have everything plugged up. So, I mean, you could plug up the switch and do all this stuff, but we're not going to do all that. So, what I'm going to do is go ahead and communicate with this So let me pause this and get everything plugged in. All right, so I got my OBD connector plugged in. Just piggybacks off of this. So I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna turn on the whole power unit. I'm gonna turn on constant voltage. You hear some relays click, because if there's actually, if you look under here, those two white boxes, there's two relays. I gotta put my, just the case ground's not really required, but might as well put it on here. So no static electricity or nothing. Heard it click, it'll shut off. Then I'm gonna turn my ignition voltage on. Hear a click. But you notice it didn't shut off that time. So let me do it again. Turn everything off. So turn my power on. Turn main voltage on. You hear it click and shut off. On and off. Turn my ignition on like I'm turning the key on. It should click and then eventually turn off after a few seconds, but it doesn't. On. Never turns off. Right? So now I'm going to go into my diagnostics. I'm going to communicate with it. I got the vehicle pulled up. I got the VIN from it. I hit the wrong button. I don't want to scan every module because we're only communicating with this one module. So let me pause this. And I'll escape out of this when it catches up. So go to control unit. This is actually through the powertrain. Go to trouble codes, read codes. It's going to scan the PCM and ATC. There's no PCM hooked up, so automatic transfer case. Now this is not an actual automatic transfer case. This is the transfer case RPO code NP1 right there. NP1 NVG263. So it doesn't have, they still call it an automatic transfer case, but it's not, doesn't have the auto button, obviously, because it's just those right there. So, go back to schematics here. So if we look at a report, so encoder circuit malfunction, active transfer case mode switch malfunction. Why? These aren't actually malfunctions right now. It's because it's doing self-checks off the board. Because none of that stuff's hooked up. If we hooked the switch up, the encoder, we wouldn't have those. But what we actually have, to exit out of this, is the code that we actually have is, let me find it here because I had it this morning, is the C0308 motor AB circuit low, like we just talked about. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to unplug this VCI here and we're going to do some tests with our DMM. Alright, so I'm going to shut all the power off. And if you look at the schematics here, the motor's not moving, it's going to the ground, so you're going to either have like no voltage or maybe a 5-volt reference, I would imagine, on both of these. But you shouldn't have 12 volts unless this relay is over there, clicked over, and it's stuck. And I think that's what's happening. So we'll check the first pin there, which is pin B, which on here is this guy. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and, now let me get my breakout lead so it's easy here to hook up while I film. Alright, so I got pin B hooked up, which is this one right there. So I'm going to do now, got my DMN hooked up in there. I'm trying to do this in film, it's not really working. Alright, so I'm going to turn main power on. I'm going to turn my constant voltage. You hear it click. Goes to 4.5 volts, or 5 volts actually, turns off. Turn my other ignition voltage on. right? It doesn't click off, but there's your 5-volt reference. So, okay. At least we're not getting 12 volts there, because if we were, that means that relay would be stuck and would begin to fault. Now let's do pin A. Do the same exact thing. All right, so I got it hooked up to pin A, which is that guy right there. Turn main power on. Constant voltage. Oh, let me do that again. My test lead came out of there. Main power on. Main voltage. 12 volts. It goes to 0, and then turn the other one on. So you heard it click and go off. Heard it click, it's 12 volts. But it never goes off. It should go off and go to 5 volts. What's sitting at 12 volts the whole entire time? And you can hear from now and when I was filming earlier that it never unclicked, that relay. So right now there's 12 volts going through pin A. 12 volts DC going through, 12 volts DC going through pin A all the time, pin A. So that tells me this relay is stuck closed, and it's always sending 12 volts down through this motor to ground, which would always be turning the motor on, and the computer knows that's not right. So that's why it disables everything. So it looks like we got a computer issue. Still never turn it off, right? So what I'm going to do now is I have another one. This isn't the right module. This is for an actual automatic transfer case, but it's just pretty much the same pinout. A little bit different software, I imagine. But we're going to hook it up and do the same checks on this known good one. But that relay never shuts off unless I shut it off with my breakout box. But if you look under here, those are those 2 white relays, 5-pin relays. So now I'm going to transfer all these wires over to this one and do the same test. All right, so I transferred over. I'm going to do pin B. This is a known good one. Again, it's not the right module. This is an NP8 RPO code, which is an automatic transfer case. The one we need is an NP1 for the 263 transfer case. Anyways, got everything hooked up, case ground on pin B, which is right there, which is on the other one, it was good, right? So, power on, main power on. Did you heard it click? It went to 4 or 5 volts and turned off. Ignition voltage. So you heard it click off there. It clicked on and then it clicked off, but the whole time it was at 5-volt reference, which on pin B is good, and the other one, pretty much the same results, right? Now let's go to pin A, which was on the old one, and that anomaly, right, different. So let's hook the wire up to pin A and do the same test. All right, got it on pin A, which is right there. So I'm going to turn main power on, and then main battery power. $12 volts goes to 0. Then let's go to ignition voltage. 12 volts like the other one, but watch for a little bit and listen. Turned off, went to 5-volt reference. So right now they're both at 5-volt reference. Right, so if I touch the other probe here, or the other pin, on pin B I got 5 volts, and on pin A I got 5 volts. So what that tells me, let's just do it one more time just to make sure with a known good one. I'm on pin A again, main power, main battery power. No, I gotta let it reset, hang on. So again, we're going back to pin A. That's the suspected bad one, which is telling me this thing is always shut, bringing voltage through. So turn the main one on. Main battery power, 12 volts. Relay clicks off. Heard it? 0 volts. Ignition voltage, click on, 12 volts. Just like we had in the other one, it should go to your 5 volts reference. Didn't heard it click off. So that's why that one clicked off. But the old one here, this one did not click off, right? So that tells me what's happening is this relay is stuck open. It's on unclicking. Whether it's an issue, I don't think it's a sticky relay, because if the relay was sticking, it would never, or could never come back. It's the input to this relay that's telling it from I don't know if it's the EEPROM in there or if it's the processor, but there's basically a signal to this relay to tell it to turn on and off from this processor, the EEPROM in there or something, right? That's telling it, but it's not releasing for a reason, or obviously because something's wrong in there. Yeah, we could go down and troubleshoot that, find the parts, but I don't think these modules are more than like 100 or 150 bucks. So, but it makes sense because if this thing's always got 12 volts going through it, you know, this is closed and it's always got 12 volts going through it, that'll always be turning your motor on, and the computer knows that's not bad, or knows that it's bad. So it throws a fault code, right? And it disables that system. So that is it for this 2001 Chevy Suburban, or sorry, 2001 Chevy truck, the 2500 HD 6.0.